Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion on the Union Budget 2022, brought to you by Sydenham Alumni Cell and Department of Economics of Sydenham College of Commerce and Economics. Today, we have amidst us CA Snehal Muzoomdar, CA Atul Joshi, CA Ashok Pradhan, three distinguished alumni of our college and renowned chartered accountant and having a professional experience. We thank them for their time and consideration and welcome them. Before we begin our discussion, we have a small message from Dr. Nanda Pandrikar ma'am, who is the in charge principal of our college.
Good morning to all faculty, alumni and dear students. Today, Sydenham Alumni Cell and Economics Department of Sydenham College have jointly organized Budget 2022 panel discussion by our eminent chartered accountant, alumni Mr. Snehal Muzoomdar, Mr. Ashok Pradhan and Mr. Atul Joshi. Budget is an important policy document of Government of India. It shapes the aspirations of millions of people like businessmen, government servant, corporate sector and common man. Budget 2022 is no longer only a statement of income and expenditure, but it is more than that. And to understand that, Sydenham Alumni Cell has invited three eminent personalities to throw light on various aspects of budget which will prove beneficial to all of you. Our principal, Dr. Madhuri Kagalkar Madam, is on leave, and as an in-charge principal, I am extremely happy that Economics Department has organized this panel discussion, which is I am sure will be appreciated by all of us and will be clear all the doubts if any. On behalf of Sydenham College, I thank our alumni who have given their valuable time for this event. Thank you and best wishes.
Good morning everyone. I welcome you all to the Budget 2022 panel discussion organized by Sydenham College Alumni Cell and Economics Department of Sydenham College of Commerce and Economics today. Union budget presentation in the Parliament is always a day when lakhs of people are glued to their television sets to listen to the Finance Minister while presenting the budget. But even after listening to the budget, a common man may not understand the intricacies of the budget. Many concepts like fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, capital expenditure, subsidies, maybe a common man may not understand it totally. Therefore, what is needed is the analysis of the budget so that a common man can understand. I am glad that our Sydenham College alumni have agreed to do this panel discussion today. And we have today with us three alumni experts, Mr. Snehal Muzoomdar, Mr. Ashok Pradhan and Mr. Atul Joshi. All these three are chartered accountants and experts in their respective field. They also have a very rich experience and they will use it today while trying to analyze the budget in simple words. I thank all of them for giving their valuable time today. I have also received cooperation and support, and for that I thank our principal, Dr. Madhuri Kagalkar Madam, in-charge principal, Dr. Nanda Pandrikar Madam, as well as my colleagues of Economics Department, Dr. Anil Chowgule Sir, Professor Rajendra Mali, and Professor Dhable Sir for their support. I congratulate the Sydenham College Alumni Cell students led by the chairperson Ms. Freya Sheikh, Ms. Sakshi Chavan and all others for doing excellent work in organizing today's event. I hope all of you will like this budget panel discussion today. Thank you all of you.
Okay. Moving on towards the next segment. We have our first panel speaker, CA Snehal Muzoomdar, has done a chartered accountancy and cost management accountancy and law. He is a practicing chartered accountant since 1980. He is on board of many companies and as independent director. He is the India head of Chambers of Commerce, Minneapolis, past president of Indo-American Society. He is regularly featured as a panel speaker on annual budget on TV and different platforms. He is an exponent of Santur. He has performed extensively in India, Europe, and US. He is the president of Indian Musicology Society and founder president of Indo-US Cultural Council. We are glad to have you, sir. And I will request sir to please continue with the session. Thank you, sir.
At the outset, I thank all of you for having invited me. For a married lady to go to her Mica is always a thrill and a pleasure. And for us alumni of the Sydenham College, to go back to Sydenham College is like something going to the Mica. Thank you very much. I think it was Mahakavi Kalidas who said that Utsav Priyaha Khalu Janaha, that we people like festivals and we like to celebrate. And in India, we have taken it one step further. Even a dry subject like budget, I think very few things can be more dry than the budget, has become a festival and a celebration in India before the budget and thereafter. I don't think anywhere in the world budget becomes such a mega event of the nation. But to create interest about budget in a common man, we have to thank the great Nani Palkhiwala. It was he who created interest in a common man. He started the first speech in 1956. That is the same year in which the Companies Act came into after that was then Company Act, then it was changed. And exactly 100 years after Wajidari Shah had to leave Lucknow because Britishers asked him to go away to Calcutta. And while leaving, he sang Babul Bora. So exactly 100 years thereafter, Nani Palkhiwala started his budget speech in a small room in Green Hotel. And his last speech had to be held in a Brabant stadium with an audience of more than 1 lakh to listen to him on a subject like budget. Why I'm mentioning this? Because Sydenham College has something to contribute to the illustrious career of Nani Palkhiwala. As you know, Nani Palkhiwala had done his MA with English language, and he wanted to be a professor of English language. He applied to Sydenham College for the post of a lecturer. He was not selected because another candidate had 3 years teaching experience. So he got the post of lecturer, and thereafter, because he did not get the post of a lecturer of English in Sydenham College, he pursued law and then eventually became one of the greatest jurists that India ever had. So Sydenham College had a little contribution to the career of Nani Palkhiwala. The origin of the word budget is from the Latin word balga, which means a pouch. Later, in Old French, it was used to describe a leather bag. By the end of the 16th century, it was used in English to describe both the container and its contents. It was only in 1733 it was used for the first time to describe the finance budget, and that too by a pamphlet writer to ridicule the then finance minister, Sir Robert Walpole. He said that the budget opened. One of the meanings related to the original word budget was something that was bulging. And no wonder many a time you find that a finance bill and other proposals are sort of bulging from the bag of the finance minister. Coming back to Nani Palkhiwala, he always felt that while it is true that the budget by itself cannot afford a complete solution, running a nation's economy is not like playing a penny whistle. It is like playing a symphony where you have to use all the instruments. But it is a budget which, more than any other instrument, sets the tone and exalts and depresses the mood of the nation for the year. Further, the government, which has enough vision to introduce an imaginative budget, would presumably have sufficient understanding to make it a part of the total package of pragmatic economic policies. In budget, historically, in India, it was presented on 28th of February at 5 p.m. Why 5 p.m.? That was because that time would match with the opening session of the Parliament of the House of Commons in England, because we were under the British rule. For decades, we continued the practice to present it at 5 p.m. even after independence, but then that time was changed to 11 a.m. in the morning. Once in 4 years, the budget was not presented on the 28th of February, but that used to be presented on the 29th of February, that being the leap year. That also happened to be the birthday of Morarji Desai, who was finance minister for many years in the 60s. Nani Palkhiwala, who was quite frustrated with the constant tinkering and terror of tampering and the temptation of tampering with the provisions of the budget from year to year, and with constant amendments taking place, he used to suggest it would be a good idea if it is statutorily provided that budget will be presented only on the 29th February. What he meant, budget should be presented only once in 4 years. There's an interesting ceremony called Halwa ceremony with the budget. Secrecy is a very important aspect of the budget. So much so that all the officers who are conducted with the presentation of the budget are locked up in the North Block for almost 2 to 3 weeks. They are sort of quarantined even without corona. They are not allowed to meet or communicate even with their family members, because secrecy has been a very important aspect of the budget. So much so that in England, when the finance minister was going to the parliament to present the budget, at the doorstep, there was a young doctor who asked the finance minister, that what is there in the budget? Can you tell me? So the finance minister said, young man, can you keep a secret? And the reporter said, yes. The minister said, so can I. And he walked away. So this was the level of secrecy observed even in England. But there is one interesting aspect. When these officers and officials are locked up in North Block, they have a party known as the Halwa party. And they are served halwa. And then the lockdown begins. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, the sweetness of halwa at the beginning of the preparation of the budget does not get reflected in the budget proposals that are presented thereafter. Income tax was first introduced in England by William Pitt on the 9th of January 1799 as a war tax because of Napoleon Wars. In India, it was introduced for the first time by James Wilson, again as a war tax, that was to finance the expenses that were incurred by the British government to control India's first independence movement of 1857. It was introduced on the 7th of April, 1860. Thereafter, the Act came of 1886. Once again in 1918. 1918 Act was short-lived, only for 4 years. In 1922 Act came, that comparatively long innings, but they found in 1960s, 1950s, the 1922 Act had become very complicated. So 1961 Act was brought. If those who had thought that 1922 Act was complicated, if they are alive today and if they've seen the Act of 1961, they would think that they had made a gross underestimate. Because, as Adam said, count that day as one when the earth, turning on its axis, imposes no further taxes. There'll be constant tinkering with the tax provisions. There'll be so many amendments from year to year and even during the year. So we are reminded of the saying by Heraclius that there is nothing permanent in life except change. The Sanskrit Kavi Magh had said, he defined beauty. What is beauty? He was asked. He said, Shane Shane Namatam Upaiti Tadeva Rupam Ramniyatanam. Something that appears new every time you see is the definition of beauty. Our lawmakers think the same about the income tax provisions. The something that appears new every time is the definition of income tax law. I just want to touch on one topic. In the 40s, 50s, 60s, and early 70s, there was a trend all over the world for very high rates of tax. Because every government thought, including India, that people should be taxed. The highest rate of tax in US was 93%. The highest rate of tax in India used to be 95% plus wealth tax and plus estate duty. So many families, by earning, used to reduce the wealth every year. It was Chanakya who said, and it was also said in Mahabharata, that the king should collect taxes in the same manner that a butterfly would suck honey from the flower. Butterfly will get honey, but that will not damage the flower. But this message was probably not conveyed to the lawmakers in those decades. So as a result, we found all over the world that led to a lot of tax evasion. No wonder, because tax rates were so high. Just imagine you are earning rupees 100. You are asked to give away rupees 95 to the government and you keep rupees 5 in your pocket. What would be your reaction? Somebody has said jokingly, that what is Eiffel Tower? Eiffel Tower is nothing but Empire State Building after payment of taxes. This led to tax evasion, and what we have observed in our practice, I'm sure that both of my learned friends would agree, that even a person who was otherwise absolutely honest to the core, when it came paying tax, he would not mind fudging the accounts or considering income. Otherwise, he would be absolutely honest. Because somehow that mentality that set in, that to save tax and even to evade tax, not necessarily a bad thing. there is a story of a famous writer in England. He was asked, "Sir, what has been the most creative work so far?" He answered, "My last income tax return." So creativity has set in income tax preparation and computation of income. That also led to corruption. No wonder, because people tried to find ways which were not exactly ethical, and to save the skin, they would go to any extent. Receiving anything in a brown envelope with the stamp of the government of India would scare people. This is true not only of India, even abroad. A leading artist in England, he received a brown envelope with the stamp of Her Majesty. He thought this is income tax notice. And for 1 week, he did not open it, fearing that would spoil his mood of creativity. In fact, that was offered for knighthood. So the secretary, after 1 week, he was surprised. Why has this person not replied and accepted? So then he sent a message, why you are not replying? And only then you realized something that he thought was income tax notice was in fact an offer for knighthood. He was being offered Sir in England. As I said, this high rates of taxes had a very high social cost, which we have not thought about, because that gave rise to a whole generation which thought that tax evasion, concealment of income is not something which is wrong. That mentality set in. That gave rise to a lot of unethical practices in business. Now the tax rates all over the world are moderate, but it will take a generation or two for the mentality to change, because even today we find that when we deal with young taxpayers, they are not that tax-centric. But when we deal with senior citizens, they still think, no, first we must save tax, then you talk of business, because of the past burden. And this also naturally led to certain practices of the tax department to extract tax. And those practices were not always that friendly. A boy was going with his mother on the sands of Chopati, and the boy gulped a coin. So the mother was scared, and so was the child. But there came a man. He said, don't worry. He lifted the child and he gave a push on the back, and the coin just came out. The mother was really grateful to the man, and he said, are you a pediatrician? He said, no, I'm a tax recovery officer. So this is the impression we have all over the world of tax recovery officer. I will end my address with a story that was very popular in the West in the past and even today. 4 people were walking on the beach. A fairy, a lame person, an honest taxpayer, and a friendly tax officer. While they were walking, at a distance they saw a coin, a shining coin, a gold coin. And they said, who will have it? So they mutually decided let us have a race. Whosoever runs the fastest will keep the coin. So the fairy, the lame person with one leg, the honest taxpayer, and the friendly tax officer, all four of them ran. Who won the race? Naturally, the lame person, because the fairy, the honest taxpayer, and the friendly tax officers were fictitious characters. With this note, I would like to end my address, and I thank the Sydenham College alumni and the Department of Economics of the Sydenham College to make me feel young once again. Thank you very much.
It was great listening to you, sir. I hope the viewers have at least gained some knowledge from your session, and you have given them information scratch from that halwa ceremony to that how the budget is prepared. It was great listening to you. Thank you, sir. Okay, so moving towards our next panel speaker, Mr. Atul Joshi is a founder and CEO of Oyster Capital Management. Mr. Joshi is a renowned economic policy veteran and an experienced banker with over 30 years of experience. Earlier, he was the managing director and CEO of Fitch Ratings Group, heading India and Sri Lanka operations. Prior to Fitch Rating, Mr. Joshi worked in ICICI Bank, Vice Bank, in different functions such as project finance, currency trading desk, debt capital market, etc. Mr. Joshi is a member of Managing Committee of Indian Merchant of Chamber IMC. He is an All India 12th rank holder in Chartered Accountants exam, a double graduate from Bombay University, and holds a bachelor degree in general law. We welcome you, sir, and we are hoping to listen to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Nilesh. And I must thank Sydenham College, its management and alumni to have invited me to speak on budget. I would like to just continue where Snehal Bhai had mentioned about the whole thing about how the taxpayers are extracted money. And let's just bring in a small concept here of economically weaker section, or the EWS. And today, you are considered economically weak if your income is 8 lakh rupees per annum. However, you begin to pay tax the moment your income crosses 2,50,000. So there itself, there is an anomaly, and somebody needs to think about it, that, how can you tax an economically weak person? But, EWS probably is a political definition, and 2,50,000 is more of finance and income tax. So that's fine. I would like to cover some economic part of the budget. One thing distinct about this budget is that what is understood as budget was not really covered. A budget is about income and expenditure account of the government of India. But this budget was more of a policy or a vision statement or something that the government intends to do. It was more about where the government thinks they want to take the nation 20 years, 25 years down the line, rather than what's going to happen in the next 1 year's time frame. The budget is supposed to talk about 1 year. The finance minister talked about the next 25 years. So let's just understand the economic impact that the budget could have if these policies are actually implemented, budget on budget for the next 25 budgets. So first thing the FM really emphasized was on the PPP, that is the public-private partnership. Now this concept has been there since 1960s. The first PPP model came somewhere in Mexico on a road project back in 1960s somewhere, and definitely it failed. The PPP, the first project of PPP in the world, actually failed. What we must take pride as Indians is that the government launched the largest PPP program in the world. And we must take pride that it is even today the most successful PPP program in the world. No country in the world has been able to execute PPP in so many sectors and so much successfully. But we Indians love to hate ourselves, so we never take pride, right? But wherever we represent, we must take pride what India has achieved under the PPP. So let's understand what is PPP. Public means government, whether it is the central government, state government, or the local government, such as a municipality. Private stands for a private enterprise, and partnership means the government hands over a certain rights of usage of an asset to the private company. For example, the road that you have, let's say, for example, Bombay Pune. We use Bombay, it's used that road the maximum. So let's talk about Bombay Pune road. The road has been developed by a private company, but the road area, the land does not belong to the company. The land continues to belong to the government. The government hands over the right to the private company to develop the road. The company would spend money by raising resources, whether they raise equity or debt or whichever way, they would construct the road. Now the question is, why would they construct the road? Because the government would allow them to collect toll tax. So that's how the government doesn't really spend money, infrastructure gets developed, and the private enterprise is fully compensated. So that is the model of the PPP. Now we know that last 2 years, the government resources have actually come under a lot of stress. So government needs to figure out a way so that the development doesn't stop. So I think very rightly, the government has actually talked about the next level of PPP. And this is going to be in roads, in ports, in airports, and in logistic parks. Railways is another thing which they have talked about, whether, we're talking about manufacturing of new sets of trains. We also have a station development corporation where the stations are developed on PPP model. So there are a lot of things which are now going away from the government's responsibility, which was the case in 1950s and 1960s, that everything that was large was developed only by the government. So we have done, if you look at Bombay International Airport, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi, some of the world-class airports are actually developed on PPP basis. So government's this initiative of developing a lot of new projects on PPP is a very positive thing. But let's just step back. I would like to draw attention to say that, how does it really benefit the government over the next 25, 30 years? One of the very things which, you would have noticed over the last 25 years is the government's initiative to disinvest. The governments of the past, 1950s and 60s and 70s, created a lot of public sector undertakings. They invested money, they gave rights, and they became giants, whether they are, let's say, for example, NTPC, the National Thermal Power Corporation, or Power Finance Corporation, or Steel Authority of India. Multiple sectors, the government set up PSUs. These PSUs today, slowly, one by one, step by step, are being divested. The government's stake in these entities is being divested. And LIC, of course, is the most talked about in the recent past. Banks were another one in 1990s when SBI got divested somewhere in 1996. So government is slowly divesting everything. 25 years, we have contributed a large sum coming in only from disinvestment. But what about 25 years or 50 years from now? If the government needs to divest something, will the government have something to sell? If we keep on divesting and not create new equity investments, it's going to be an issue, to my mind. Therefore, the government, while launching PPP, needs to think about creating equity investment in these projects. Because if the government doesn't do it now, then maybe our generations, 25 years, 30 years, 50 years down the line, God forbid, if there is an issue, there's nothing to sell. So I think the government needs to think about it. So while PPP is good, structuring of the PPP is very important. Government, you understand the word subsidy, right? At the infrastructure project level, there is something called viability gap funding, or it's a subsidy, passes through the profit and loss account of the project. Government could simply convert the VGF, viability gap funding, into equity and keep that equity stream going on for the future disinvestments. So that's one positive. And a suggestion, in a way to speak, or when you guys become large, you guys become IAS officers, you guys take hold of government responsibility, think about it, think 25 years, 50 years down the line. So that is one very good program of the budget statement, and I appreciate that. Let's talk about the next one. The next one, which probably has gone quite unnoticed, is the government's stress on creating innovative financing structures. For logistics parks, the government has said 20,000 crores would be raised. However, the instrument details are not available, but the stress is on creating new sets of instruments. And I'm sure the instruments would be such that it would not count as government's debt, which is very, very, very important. And I'll come to that, why it is important for the government not to create new debt burden. So that is a very good thing. The second thing which the government has mentioned is about issuance of sovereign green bonds. Now, India probably is one of the very few countries in the world which is a multi-trillion-dollar economy and has not borrowed outside. India is one country which has always resisted the temptation of just availing 2, 3, 4% interest rate benefit by borrowing in offshore market. We've always borrowed only in India, within the country, in our rupee, through RBI. RBI is the treasurer for the government, so RBI manages the government's borrowing program. This one is called the Sovereign Green Bonds Program. What is not clear is that the borrowing is going to be onshore or it's going to be offshore. If it's onshore, thumbs up, it's a great thing to do. Let's not use this excuse to borrow offshore and open a door which can then lead to a lot of vagaries of the global markets. The impact we have seen on sovereign borrowing nations in 1997 was crazy. A lot of countries went into a default category. Same is the case in case of 2008-2009 global financial crisis. So I would desist or not be of the approval mind if the government was to look at the sovereign green bonds outside of this country. The third thing that the government talked about was the river linkage programs. Now, these are fantastic ideas. It's like husband and wife, in a house, they always divide responsibilities. The center has certain responsibilities, the state has certain responsibilities, and then there are joint responsibilities. Here, the river program linkage is a very important thing for agriculture. This government has always been stressing on the importance of developing agriculture on a sustainable basis. Now, if the rivers are linked, it could really actually push India into the next level of agricultural exporting country. However, the subject of river is a matter of state government and not a matter of the central government. Therefore, the FM mentioned there that if the states are willing, we should be able to launch these programs and also bring in some kind of central level assistance, whether it is in funding or whichever other way. But I think it's a superb idea. And if the government is able to do it, it could change the whole economy of that region. The third thing that the government talked about was the data centers. The data centers have been given the status of infrastructure, which means that a lot of funding would be made available to these data centers, which is essential to ensure that the social media, that data that it generates is stored in India. It's also important that we actually move to core banking and several other things which the tech initiatives the government is taking, the private sector is taking. The data is stored in India. We do not want our data to be made available outside of this country. It's a very expensive proposition. So incentives to build data centers in the country have been provided. So that's a very positive step. Then comes the MSME, hospitality sector, which is, the hotels, restaurants, resorts, travel, tourism, the taxis, etc., which run for travel and tourism. They all have suffered very big time over the last 2 years because of COVID and the lockdown, and people were not able to travel. Government has given a special scheme of 50,000 crores only for the hospitality sector, whereby this money would be made available to hospitality sector entities at a concessional rate so that they can see through the bad times. This is a very positive step. The other announcement which has come is that in the past, during COVID time, government had given certain concessional loans to various sectors. Those loans would now be given a 1 year of further maturity. Government is also talking about allocation of 2 lakh crores for MSME. Now here, let's step back. Again, a 2 lakh crore has been talked about. Where is the money going to come from? In what time frame it would be disbursed? What is the mechanism made available? These are the questions which remain silent. So let's just look at some of the data for MSME. 2014, MSME were approximately 8% of the total gross credit. Today, it is just 4% of the total bank credit, which means I'm not saying that the MSME bank credit has reduced, but it has actually not grown much. If you look at the last 8 years, it has grown just about 27%, which means 3% per annum, which is not a very exciting number. Now, MSME, unless are supported, growth in industry, your growth in employment would suffer. So these schemes are good, but you really need to ensure that the credit discretion is allowed to the bankers. When we go to make jewelry, there is certain scrappage that happens. Certain amount of gold is wasted. Same is the case with MSME. If you give loans to MSME, obviously they are very small. Their ability to withstand cycles may not be very strong, and there would be certain NPAs. You can't be putting bankers to trouble by arresting them, putting them under inquiry if there is no first case of doubting their integrity. Today, the bankers do not want to lend to MSME, and that's a very, very big negative. We need to think about not just creating schemes, but building a bridge of trust between the government, their inquiry officers, and the bankers. Unless that is done, MSME remains a questionable thing. Let's talk about an opportunity for the youth. And I think you guys really need to, while studying, also think about certain startups, especially in tier 3, tier 4 cities, whether it is, say, for example, a city like Bharuch, or it is a city like Rajkot, or a city like Nasik, Nagpur, Raipur, etc., smaller towns, Coimbatore in the south. Electronic vehicles is something which the government is really pushing for. And there are a lot of opportunities, whether it is distribution of electric vehicles or battery swapping facilities. These are the schemes which the government is pushing, and the youngsters really need to think about, while I'm studying, can I do something in the electric vehicles space? I think it's a sunrise industry, a lot of opportunities for youngsters. You just need to go out, think about it, and do something about it. It's a very positive step. Let's talk about certain other smaller things which I think are positive. Government has talked about linking 1.2 lakh post offices to core banking. Very positive step. However, the people who would be using the post offices would be farmers. Core banking is in English. So can we have a bridge core banking solution or a local language banking solution which a farmer or a poor person can read in his own language? And that is then plugged into the core banking. Otherwise, the farmers would be taken for a ride. Second thing, the farmers cannot remember so many passwords. And again, the systems force you to change the passwords, user IDs, 8 digits, special symbols, digital, numeric, alpha, all those things. Why can't we look at a thumb impression for a login into the core banking for villages, for the post offices? So local languages, making it user friendly. These are the things that the government really needs to think through. I'm sure they are thinking about it, but this is something which, unless taken into consideration, could open doors for fraud with these poor people. Government has talked about several other things, but I would now come back to the core. One of the things that one must look at when it's looking at a budget is the interest cost. What is the interest that the government of India is going to pay over the next 1 year? And the figure for this year is 9 lakh crores, a little over 9 lakh crores, 9.2 lakh crores, if I mistake not. Now, put it in perspective. We are earning about 32 lakh crores. Out of 32 lakh crores, 9 lakh crores is going to be spent only in interest. That's one side of it. So it's an extremely high interest that you are paying out of your income. The other way to look at it is that where are the other comparable countries? There are several other triple B countries. Our rating is triple B minus. So triple B category countries generally pay about 10 to 12% of their revenue as interest. We are paying almost 30% of our revenue as interest. And of course, there were certain things that we should bear in mind. And very important thing is, what's my net borrowing? The government's net borrowing program is approximately 11 lakh crores. Out of 11 lakh crores, 9 lakh crores is going towards paying interest. What it means is we are actually borrowing just to pay the interest. That's a classical debt trap. When entire borrowing, or a very large part, a lion's share of your borrowing is only to pay interest, you are actually getting into a debt trap. It's very difficult to escape it unless you grow substantially and you ensure that your debt is actually reduced. This is a never-ending story, and the end road is not a very pleasant result. If I were to look at what is it for us to learn as individuals, you as young students, I would say, don't borrow in your life. The temptation of borrowing at 5%, 6%, 7% is very high. You will get into a debt trap. Don't borrow. Hold back the temptation. Stay within your means. This is our ancient Indian prudent lifestyle. They is when you have no debt. Debt is Daitya, is the Rakshas, is the demon. So stay away from it. If you look at the balance sheets of large companies, they are all going towards net zero debt. That means that cash and debt should be either equal, or cash on balance sheet should be higher than the debt outstanding, or there should be no debt at all. So why are the large companies going towards debt reduction? They've ultimately realized debt is not good. So learning for you from the budget, don't borrow. Stay within your means. So coming back to the last point, which I think is a very positive, is the amount of subsidy reduction. I think this government has done very well to reduce very aggressively several subsidies. Especially food subsidy has been reduced by almost 60,000 crores. Similarly, a 20,000 crore reduction in fertilizer subsidy, small other reductions in Manrega of almost 25, 30,000 crores. So various of these subsidies which go to support the poorest have slowly been reduced, because the government needs to ensure that in the long run, these people stand on their own feet. That's possible through development, and development is possible through capex. Government of India has provided approximately 7 lakh crores towards capital expenditure, and that is something which is the highest I've seen in the last 20 years. One thing which we need to really bother about is that whenever the government feels the pressure of fiscal deficit going beyond their control, they reduce the capex. So government, I think, has set up a very aggressive target of 6.4 lakh crores, 6.4% for fiscal deficit. And if that target has to be met, I think there would be pressure not to spend on the capex. However, let's see as we go along. Let's see where the interest rates go. If the interest rates go where they are heading, I think the government would feel the pressure on capex expenditure. Overall, I would say there's nothing much for the individuals or for the corporates. For once, they've not really tinkered much with the interest rate, the taxation rates, but it's a vision statement. They've laid out the road path for the next 20 years, 25 years, and it's well appreciated. The government seems to be thinking futuristic. Whether budget was the right stage or not, let's leave that discussion aside. But on a good note, I would say that at least somebody is thinking about future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing all your insights. It was wonderful knowing about the points that you stated about the interest rates and PPP partnership and the government being futuristic. So we actually had one question. Since there's an increase in the capex expenditure, what do you think? Was it a right decision to take the capex expenditure to the highest that the government has taken? And what are your views on this?
See, the thing is, let's divide the capital expenditure at the country level into two. One is the private sector capital expenditure. What is the private sector capital expenditure? It's the companies that actually spend for expansion of their industry. Say, for example, a steel company is setting up a new steel plant. Or let's say, for example, a mining company, which is, setting up different new mines or whatever, the private sector spending on capital expenditure. Because for the last 6-7 years, we've not seen a very aggressive expansion plans coming in from private sector. The responsibility to ensure that the capital expenditure is made and the path is laid out for the future, the responsibility falls on the central government. So the central government has no choice but to spend. Now, the way the central government can spend is to build the infrastructure. The infrastructure is something which facilitates the growth, and the growth results into employment. Employment results into better revenues for the government, better revenues for the nation, and that would set up different types of smaller industries across the nation. An example of this could be in 2002-03, we actually launched the Golden Quadrilateral, which is the road that actually goes from north to the west, west to the south, south to the east, and east to the north. So the whole 4 corners of the country were connected. The moment that happened, your business, especially in transportation, went very high. Your automobiles went very high. The accessibility increased, and the economic development happened across the country just because of the road was set up by the government. So capital expenditure by the government is a fantastic step. Let me put it in perspective for you. The central government, if I look at the country level, the central government spends about 40% of the total capital expenditure of the country. The 60% actually comes from the state governments. So not just the central government, even the state government spend on capital expenditure, which spurs growth in the long term. The highest amount that the government has allocated is a very positive step. We need to see how it is spent.
Thank you for the answer, sir. And we totally understand. It is a good decision also, considering the fact that the government has increased the expenditure when it comes to building national highways, and there is a good target set. So another question is that if you see the education sector, there is a new plan of, increasing more number of television channels to provide the education. But we see that there are very few teachers who are, the target which was set to employ teachers, that hasn't been met. So what do you think about the government's focus on the education sector specifically?
See, there are a few things which the government is doing in the education sector. This is just one of the things that you mentioned. There were 2 other things that were mentioned. One of them was to link the industry level requirements back to the education institutions. So there is a skilling program which the government is launching, whereby you would actually connect the industry requirements back to the education institutions. If you look at Germany, they have a program under Mittelstand. Mittelstand is actually MSME, whereby the education institutions have some kind of internship for the students with the industry. So by the time they graduate out, they are actually in line with the requirement of the industry. In India, there is a little bit of a disconnect. Even if you are, let's say, an engineer, your on-the-job experience really lacks. So the industry doesn't really pick you up immediately. So I think that was a very important announcement and the step in the right direction, that now the industry and education institutions would be linked together for skill development. Third thing which the announcement happened on the education sector is that in the GIFT City, the government has allowed foreign universities to set up a campus across the different parts of education, whether it is technical, financial, or otherwise. And that would be without any domestic regulations applicable to such universities. I think that would open up a lot of research opportunities, a lot of global exposure to Indian students without going abroad. So these are the three things put together. I agree with your point that the teachers have not been trained. There is a small program which the government has done, which is train the trainer. So the government is actually trying to train the teachers so that they actually come online, start training, and also adopt the futuristic skills. So there are programs, but yes, given the volume that we need to cater to, I think it's a progress that we need to be patient about, and it will take time before our teachers are fully trained so that they can give futuristic training of futuristic subjects to our students. Patience is the key. Government is trying, but I think budget is also an issue. Let's see how it takes shape.
It was wonderful knowing, sir, and your insights on the topic, and talking about the digital university and skill development. In the long run, they will all lead to the better future that we believe India will have. And so coming up to the health sector, we can see that the health sector now focuses more, like the budget also emphasized on mental health being another issue which is taken up. What do you think about where should the budget have focused specifically in terms of the health sector?
See, Snehal Bhai answered it already. He said that we are Utsav Priya Praja. So if you go back to when we were children, we were of your age, India was a very, very happy country. We were not very rich. First salaries of 4,000 rupees, people were able to celebrate. Not many people had cars. Not many people had televisions at home. You would go and sit in neighbor's house. But you celebrated every single festival with zest. Now, there are two sides to it. If you celebrate, that means you are stress-free. So you come together, you forget everything. So our ancient rishis actually created a lifestyle. They built economy around our festivals. I'll give you a small example. Some years back, one of the political parties in Maharashtra ensured forcefully that first 4 or 5 days of Ganpati festival should be a holiday in the schools. Now, as a result, you would find a lot of students, young students, school-going students are participating in the local activity of a Ganpati Mandal, right? What does it mean? It means that the student is stress-free. He's able to mix, share feelings, be with one, and forget about, at least for 5 days, all tension about the education. Our economy, if you look at, of the temples, it is fantastic. Just take any temple in this city. Let's take Siddhivinayak. You see the amount of employment that Siddhivinayak temple is creating. The flowers come from outside of Bombay. So there are farmers who are getting employment because of the flowers. The transportation people are getting employment because the flowers need to reach the god. There are people having stalls there just outside the temple. There are security people. There are people who look after your juta. So there are so many things that a temple does. A temple is about an economy. If we understand this, then there shall be no stress psychological. What we have done blindly, especially in the 1980s and 90s, we blindly followed the West, saying that we must work harder. The West has actually moved to 35 hours a week. We are talking about 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week. People take pride in saying, I work for 80 hours a week. It's shameful. You're not looking after your family. You're always stressed. So many very high-end executives have died because of heart attack at the age of 40, 42, 40. What are we trying to prove? You have forgotten the essence of our scriptures. We are Utsav Priya, and it does not mean it's a wastage. It addresses your mental health, it addresses the economy, and it addresses the expenditure of the private individuals for a social good. You are generating a lot of employment the moment you celebrate. So mental health is happening because we are going away from our base of the culture. We are not Westerners, we are not Gora Chamda. We are Indians, and we have our own culture. The moment you go away, their problems will come to you. You follow the West, their problems will come to you. What are their problems? Mental, physical, several other things. So it's a good step, but you are simply addressing, these symptoms. The root cause is to go back to the basics. Swami Vivekananda said, go back to the Vedas. And we need to do that. Anyways, so that's a long answer to your short question.
No, sir, really loved your perspective, and the way you explained about the temples, it got me to thinking if, we actually think more on this and take a step in the direction as you suggested, that, the culture that we follow, having a proper work-life balance that we earlier had years ago, and before we started following the Western culture and giving it the importance, I think it will surely take us the way ahead that we want to. Thank you so much, sir, for all your answers and your time. Thank you. So now it's time we move towards our third speaker. And our third panelist is C. Ashok Pradhan. Sir is a chartered accountant having over 40 years of experience, and he's a senior partner and CDK Associates. Sir also has a master's degree in commerce from Bombay University, and is also a graduate member of the Institute of Cost and Works Accounts of India, 1997. He's a member and a certified internal auditor and a certified information system auditor. Sir has also passed a certification from the National Stock Exchange Limited, AMFI, and has also passed a course in forensic auditing and fraud detection. With this, he's also diversified and has great experience in consultancy, and has published many articles in the All India Chartered Accountant magazine and in the Business World magazines on the budget. We are glad to have you here, sir, and would love to know your perspective.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Sakshi, for such a nice introduction. Respected Sydenham faculty, learned alumni, and students. Budget is about taxation. My previous speakers have given various qualities of income tax officers, etc., etc. However, Edmund Burke has said regarding taxation, to tax and to please is like to love and to be wise. So let us be wise even though we are taxed. As students, one has to understand the many tax provisions which are important not only from examination point of view, but also from the practices in day-to-day life. So what are the type of taxes we are talking about in the budget? We have direct taxes, we have indirect taxes. How do we distinguish? Direct taxes are those which are to be paid by the individual on his own account. So supposing you are having an income by way of salary or business income or whatever, interest, dividends, you have to pay tax on it. That is your direct tax. And indirect tax would be when everybody else is paying the same tax when buying the similar goods, services. So let us go into direct taxes. Are there any changes? Most of us, if we go by the newspaper reports, if we go by the different press, television interviews, there is no tinkering of taxes. There are no changes in the tax rates. Please go through the Finance Act. There are so many small changes in the tax rates. Now, when you say a tax rate, as far as direct taxes is concerned, it consists of three components. First, the basic tax. Second is the surcharge. And third is the cess. The government has left the basic tax unchanged. However, there are any number of sections affecting the surcharge and the cess. They have reduced the surcharge in certain cases. They have reduced the cess in many cases. A simple example, long-term capital gains tax. There, the surcharge was up to 37%. They have reduced it from that to 15%. So that is a benefit if you are making profit on the share market. So now if we go to the indirect taxes, there will be so many changes. We'll come to it later. First, let us complete the direct taxes. Now, the budget has two sort of incentives and disincentives. So, what are the incentives in the respect of direct taxes? That we will understand. Now, incentives are in the nature of tax rebates. There have been increase in the tax rebates for certain sections, like disabled children. If they have a policy taken by their parents, then when the policy matures under section 80DD, the amount of the policy does not become taxable now. It can be given without deduction of tax or liability for tax. Then, as Mr. Atul Joshi also mentioned regarding international financial services centers, they have been given a lot of tax benefit. Generally, the foreign investors who come and invest in such international financial tax-free zones will not be having so many of their incomes liable to tax. Of course, the finance minister has been very cooperative. The minimum tax, which was 18.5% on cooperative societies, has been reduced to 15%. And the mother of all tax benefit is your production linked incentive schemes, PLI schemes. Under the PLI scheme, if you observe the scheme rules, your profits will be taxed only at 15%. This benefit has been extended by 1 more year. Now, these are the incentives. What about the disincentives? The disincentives, what the budget has provided if you do not file your tax return regularly, then you will be liable for higher rate of tax deduction at source. Generally, 10% is the rate of TDS, but if you do not file your previous year's return, then you may be liable for 30% TDS. So you cannot forget to file your income tax return, as happened in a case of a union cabinet minister who forgot to file his returns for 8 years. So we cannot now afford to do that. Now coming to the, these are the tax rate incentives, disincentives. But let us come now to the procedures. The procedures under the direct taxes have gone many small changes, which you should be aware as a student and also as a citizen. So one of the changes is, if department is going against you in the appeal, it cannot file appeal on the same matter for a number of years. The budget has provided that unless the question of law is settled either by the High Court or Supreme Court, repetitive appeals cannot be filed by the income tax or department. So the harassment to that extent will be less. Then there was one more provision whereby if you missed out certain things, adjustments or incomes, you were charged with concealment, misrepresentation. And what was the remedy? Once you got a notice under section 148, you had to go into appeal. So to avoid all this, you have now got a new window. The window is that you can rectify your return. But when you are rectifying or giving the correct information, you have to pay certain additional tax, say 25% more tax. This is a very good provision whereby unnecessary litigation is avoided. Of course, this is against the interest of the tax practitioners, but then it is good for the citizens. It is good for the nation as a whole not to spend time in litigation. Now coming to the indirect taxes. The indirect taxes have been changed in several rates. I will not go into those rates, but I will go where the structures are changed. So the customs duty rates, the GST rates, of course, are determined by the council. They remain the same, but there are minor modifications. Then you have the duty drawback rates, you have the cess rates, which have all undergone changes. The excise duty rates have also been changed in such a manner that our country will reduce its import of crude oil, petroleum. Now, how it has been changed? All the government-owned petrol companies control 90% of the petroleum business. They are currently mixing 8% ethanol with the petrol, whereas the private companies which are selling petrol are not mixing any ethanol. The government target is to have 20% ethanol by 2025 so that our import bill of crude and petroleum gets considerably reduced. Then there is a very interesting change in indirect taxes coming through the expansion of the role of special economic zones. Now, what are special economic zones? Supposing you go for an audit in a special economic zone like SEEBS, which is at Santa Cruz. Now, when I went there for an audit, I had to surrender my laptop. I had to give an inventory of what I was carrying so that I do not carry goods which would be exported from that zone, which is not liable for duty. So I have now a capacity of factory buildings, factory sheds, machinery in the SEZs. And looking at the global economic scenario, if I am not able to export through this infrastructure, then should my infrastructure remain idle? No. So what government has done is they are bringing fresh litigation, fresh legal framework to incorporate production in the SEZs even for the domestic sector. So Make in India will be allowed not only in the domestic facilities but also in SEZs. For that, there will be a further indirect tax equalization levy so that these units which are producing in SEZs will have to pay the same tax as the local manufacturers for local consumption. The SEZ portal is there where you have to pay your taxes in respect of goods which are exported. The inputs are totally tax-free. So the same portal will now be modified to cover these domestic production related activities. So this is a very important aspect of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Our production facilities should be utilized to the maximum extent. There is a ratio analysis always involved in all our studies as commerce students, as economic students, engineering students. Now, I will give you some of the budget ratios, so your understanding of the budget will become still better. Sakshi had raised a very interesting question as to why we are spending so much on infrastructure. The infrastructure budget this year is in the region of 7.35 lakh crores, which is an increase of 35% over the previous year. Now, why it is there? The government of India wants to improve the logistics cost, which is today forming around 14% in respect of goods and services. It is 14% of the GDP. That has to be reduced to 7 to 8%, which is there in advanced economies. So our goods will become more competitive, they will become cheaper in the global market, and we will be able to compete with China. That is the long-term aim of this budget. Now, what is GDP? Now, The full form everybody knows, gross domestic product. It is the market value of all the goods and services produced. Why it is important to understand this? Then you get the macro budget. Up to now, what I had given you was the small sections, rules, everything. But look at it from a bigger perspective. The bigger perspective is what is the ratio of the various spending that we are doing as compared to the GDP. Now, as far as infrastructure or capital expenditure on a total basis is only 4.6% of the GDP, whereas in advanced economies, it is anywhere between 7 to 8%. So, if you say you are spending more on capital expenditure, that is not correct. We are spending less than 5%. Now, think of yourself as an individual. You prepare your individual budget based on your pocket money, based on your stipend, based on your whatever honorarium or profits you are making, correct? So, now how much of it will you spend for future capital expenditure? You will spend at least 10 to 20%. So, compare it with what the nation is spending, hardly less than 5%. So, we have to look at the budget from that perspective. Now, the impact on students of this budget. Atul Bhai has very rightly taken, you go to a gift city, meaning where the international financial transactions are tax-free. There, instead of going abroad for foreign education, if you go to a gift city, you will be able to get the same education. Okay. Of course, it will take a little time by the time the universities are built up, but the faculties will be there. Then, these will be centers or hubs of international arbitration, international taxation, and so many benefits will be available. Even if you are working for a foreign client or a foreign multinational, maybe your salaries will be tax exempt, your incomes will be tax exempt. So you can plan where all these hubs will be there, plan to settle there. That could be your future destination. Then there are so many portals which have come. Atul Bhai had mentioned, and one of the portals is Desh-Stack portal, where all your learnings, skilling efforts can go into. So all these new initiatives, one class, one channel, TV channel, Sakshi had mentioned. So there are going to be at least 100 classes, 100 channels, which will be multiplied into 1200. So you can select if you are in 11th standard, 11th class channel. So if you are in SY, the SY channel. So all these channels you can take up. Now you have had an overview of the budget. Budget is what? As Atul Bhai said, living within one's means. However, I have always believed in one thing. I do not believe in the adage, neither a lender be nor a borrower be. Why? We have learned in our financial management, capital gearing. Okay? So what is capital gearing? You borrow to grow your earnings, you repay the borrowings, you borrow more, you increase your balance sheet size, you repay the increased borrowing, and this is the way Indians have grown all over the world. Business is easy. It is with other people's money, is it not? So neither a borrower nor a lender B may not suit the current times. You have to have adequate capital, adequate infrastructure, and adequate degrees in your profile, in your curriculum vitae, so that you get the best possible work opportunities. I will conclude by saying, live young India, live free, live within budget, and not beyond means. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was wonderful how you explained right from the very basics of what is direct taxation and indirect taxation, and then took us through the budget. And really loved your perspective on so many different things, that you mentioned in totality that we can consider. And so now we have a few questions from our audience too, and which we would like to ask. So as we've all noticed that the budget did not mention or focus on any change in tax slabs. So what are your views on this? My question is for both Ashok sir and Snehal sir. What do you think? Is it the right direction and the right step that the government has taken? Because the middle class section, especially, was waiting for the budget to come up and a reduction in the tax rates. Snehal sir, can you share?
I think this would be the privilege of C. Ashok Pradhan to answer. But talking about the historical background, as I said, not referring to this particular year's budget, that over the years, all over the world, the tax rates have been coming down. In India also, we had 95% plus tax rate of income tax. That has been brought down. And the emphasis of the government in the recent years has been that they want to do away with exemptions and they want to have moderate tax rates. Exemptions lead to a lot of complications. Some of the exemptions were given some decades ago, and that had a certain social purpose. But those times may have changed, but the exemption may have been retained, and there may be some of the exemptions are still required, but then those provisions need to be updated because certain limits were fixed back in 1995, and that still continues today in 2022. But overall speaking, and I'm restricting myself to the historical background of tax rates, all over the world, the tax rates have come down, and so is the situation in India. And the emphasis is to have fewer exemptions, if not no exemptions, with moderate tax rate. That over to Ashok.
Yeah, if I may add, see, the basic rationale behind slab rates not being changed is 100% stability in the tax rates. We can attract investment from abroad only if our tax rates are stable. Now, what you have referred to is slab rates for individuals. Now, these are individuals in the EWS category, economically weaker section, up to 8 lakhs. Because beyond 10 lakhs, the slabs are same for everybody. So the incentives are in a different fashion. Like without changing the slab rates, they are trying to subsidize or give incentives for medical treatment, insurance payments, and you are in GST, they are promoting electric vehicles. In that fashion, they are trying to reduce cost or your infrastructure cost also, so that we import less. So instead of at the individual tax rates being tweaked and create an impression this country has a stable tax structure. Okay.
Sir, sir, it is seen that there is an increase in inflation, and there is not such that increase in salary, and but the even the income tax is stable. So there is the only way for the individual left is that there is an increase in tax. So there is not increase in salary, inflation is rising. Anyhow, the individual have to pay more tax. So what are your views, and what the government should take steps onto this? Because individual will be paying more and more tax if there is a stable tax slab.
Nilesh, if I may say so, inflation is good up to a certain extent. Hyperinflation is bad. Having said that, what we have to learn is to have a increased variable component covering the cost of living. So the cost of living, if it gets compensated through DA and other allowances, dearness allowance, and what you call government has tried to address this through import purchase price parity, so of course the individual in the short run is going to suffer, but a simple example like tur dal is the one of the basic commodity required by any Indian household, and the Indian farmer is being encouraged to produce more so that imported tur dal will not be required because their prices, and same way cooking oil. Today you do not get any worthwhile cooking oil, any brand below 200 rupees per liter, which was about 100, up to a year back. So the inflation is there, but through MSP, they are trying to what you call control the inflation by producing more, increasing the supply.
Okay, sir. So we have a next question. Sir, the government have claimed in the PLI scheme that they were able to generate 60 lakh jobs. For the country like India, do you think that this figure is enough, as the unemployment data suggests that there is an increase in unemployment from after COVID? Because before COVID there was 30 million unemployment, 30 million unemployed youth, and after that it is increased to 40 million. So what are your views on this?
I think this is a very important question. Of course, that's not for us chartered accountants. We are not the best people to answer. But the fact remains that even these figures that we are seeing, there is a bit of understatement here, because during the COVID, what has been experienced, that the employment in the agriculture sector has gone up. Now, this is not necessarily a productive employment. Okay, because what has happened, that those who were serving in the cities, because of lockdowns, etc., and because of some of the businesses and industries closing down the shutters, they had to go back to the farms and they had to work on the farms. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there will be more production. Something that was done by 5 people now will be done by 8 people. So there is a bit of hidden unemployment also, which have risen that because of Corona. Of course, last 2 years have been unusual times. The way we have come out itself is a bit of miracle if one thinks about it retrospectively. Okay, because fortunately, to a great extent, we have come out of the pandemic effects, but people who have suffered are the small to medium industries, and consequently, their employees, because when the small and medium sector had to close down the shutters, the employees were naturally sort of retrenched. So those people have gone back to the villages and they have joined the farms, but that will not necessarily contribute to higher production. They have gone back out of sheer desperation. So there is a need to have additional employment, not necessarily back in the city, but also productive employment in the rural area. This has to be addressed. And the budget, in its various ways and means, is directly and more indirectly trying to increase employment by giving additional incentives to the SME sector.
Can I add to this?
Sure, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. See, Nilesh, what is happening is there is a big divide between digitally literate and digitally illiterate. The basic problem of unemployment today is this digital divide. The people who have been able to maintain their jobs are more or less those who have had computer skills, technical skills, and those who did not have such skills or such literacy. That is the problem. You are absolutely right. People have lost jobs due to Corona. They have lost lives. Their entire business has become unsettled. What could be sold in the shop cannot be sold in the shop. What could be sold on the cart has become electronic. I mean, these are problems. So what the budget is also trying to do is upskilling wherever possible, vibrant villages, the different schemes, what they are trying to do. Now, how these will pan out, it all depends from the community psychology, the individuals involved there. For example, now the states of Gujarat, Maharashtra, they are able to adapt much faster than the states of Bihar, Chhattisgarh, MP. Now, so employment there would be lesser than these other states. So these issues are there. But then what is a budget? You are planning your income and expenditure. Okay, so whether to use these type of what you call structures to generate employment, that and also with such diverse manpower, there is no uniformity anywhere. The level of skills, semi-skills, unskills. So, one cannot hold a budget responsible for unemployment.
And if I may add, Ashok,
Yeah.
I think two more points. That as far as budget is concerned, there is an emphasis on the further skill development. And I think that is very, very important aspect, I think, which was also touched upon by Atul Bhai. Okay, because he gave example of Germany, where the emphasis has been not only on a higher education, but also on skill development. And that is where we have a problem here that even a person who is qualified from engineering college, he's not able to start a job because he does not have necessary skill. And for many skills that are required, one need not be an engineer, or one need not be MSc or PhD in science, or for that reason, even accountancy. But in the middle level, somehow we are not able to, in the past, cater to that aspect of skill development. This budget has tried to address that issue. Of course, budget can't be the solution to everything, as Ashok Bhai said. Uh, that budget is basically income and expenditure of the particular year. And slightly going a little tangent on this subject of employment, there is a little contradiction also. Some of the developments themselves have caused unemployment. I mean, for example, that many of us have found the landowners at various places, because of the industries coming up, they got a fantastic rate for the land that they had, something that they had never imagined in the last 7 generations. Because land prices shot up overnight, and either the private industry or even a government of the state have paid them something about 5 to 10 times or even 25 times the market rates that would have prevailed otherwise. But in many cases, what we have found, not connected with the budget at all, but socially speaking, what has been found that with the sudden increase in the kitty of the villagers, those have not been invested properly, but by and large, they have bought foreign cars, they have bought expensive gadgets, they have spent all the money in parties and in drinks, and after 4 or 5 years, in spite of getting a booty out of land, they come back to what they were. So it is equally important that when these kind of developments take place and when a lot of money comes to the hands of the farmers, there is a corresponding skill program so that their children can be productively employed. Otherwise, they become a social nuisance.
Totally understanding the points you said, sir. I think we all agree that the problems of unemployment are existing, but the budget is indirectly focusing on them, like taking both the questions about the tax slabs not being changed for the and affecting the middle class and salaried people, and second thing, the unemployment rate increasing. So I think both have indirect
Can I
solutions.
add, Sakshi? Can I
Sure, sir,
add?
yes.
See, in India, we have an Apprentice Act 1961, whereby ITIs, Industrial Training Institutes, have been empowered to take for training various jobs which require engineering knowledge, but not that degree of engineering, what you call preciseness, but actual trade. Just like in CA, you have articleship, in law, you have articleship, internship. So these type of work, or in MBA, you have what you call project work that makes you suitable for direct employment. Our education system itself is such that whatever we study in school and colleges does not make us fit to be employed, does not make us fit to earn money. That is the problem. Over to you.
Yes, sir. I mean, totally understanding. And if we take everything into consideration, indirectly, the government has taken up steps for both of the points. And as you mentioned, it is really important to keep the tax rates as well constant in order to attract foreign investment, taking up the first question. And for the second, like upskilling is there, digital universities are there. So indirectly, there have been direct steps taken, and ultimately, the budget cannot answer all our questions. Um, so we have one last question. There is this recent trend of cryptocurrency across the country, especially increasing after the pandemic. And we've seen that a 30% tax rate has been introduced on all the digital assets. So what do you think about this? I mean, will it encourage people getting into crypto and digital assets, or will it discourage them?
Can I take up?
Sure, sir. Sure.
Yeah. See, whenever you see an ad on cryptocurrency, either in the newspaper or TV, there is a statutory warning. Cryptocurrencies are subject to market and legal risk. Legal risk. So this question was asked to the finance minister also. Yesterday, her interview was there. She has replied, I don't know whether cryptocurrency is legal, illegal, but people are making good money. If people are making good money, I have to use the budget as a tax extraction measure. 1% TDS and 30% is the tax on the amount involved in the transfer. So I am here to increase the tax kitty. For cryptocurrency, the government is discussing with various sections of the society what is to be done. And of course, they have come up in the budget RBI's own digital currency. So if as students you want big profits, take big risks, cryptocurrency is like a mirage today because it has no legal existence, no legal recognition. Don't go into it for the making quick money. Over to you.
I think, yes, I would just say that when we are talking about finance bill, all that has been done. I mean, they are not certified this as a legal tender. They've just said, we are going to tax you in a particular manner. And even if these provisions were not there, this income was taxable and probably at the same rate, probably because people have been making money. So that would have been taxed even otherwise. But now they've prescribed a way to tax. There are certain provisions like no set off of losses, etc. So something like a speculation income, but here you can't even carry forward the loss. So as far as finance bill is concerned, all that, as Ashok Bhai said, all that the finance minister has said, whether this is a vice or a virtue, we are going to tax it. And this problem has been historically there. In France, when Napoleon, he had levied high tax on tobacco, a social lady went up to him and said, Napoleon, what are you doing? The tobacco is a vice and you want to get money out of vice. And Napoleon said, my gracious lady, you show me two virtues that I can tax and I'll be happy to tax them.
Right, sir. Just there was this particular question which many students actually came up with, was that the rate of tax of the cryptocurrency is equivalent to what we have on winnings from lotteries, gambling, etc. So, I mean, is it so a way that the government is discouraging us, or it is accepting that maybe there might be a possibility in future India too will accept cryptocurrency?
See, basically, what they are going to tax is income. Okay, they are not committing whether it is legal, illegal, whatever it is. It reminds me of a tax raid which happened in respect of a film actress. Stacks of cash was found hidden in her bathroom. Now, she declared that income as income from prostitution, and it was not liable to tax. So up to now, people have been saying cryptocurrency income is not liable to tax because it is not legally recognized. This is what the government has changed. Now it has brought it within the tax ambit, irrespective of whether it is illegal or legal. Over.
Yes, sir. No, totally, that clears all our questions, and we have a better understanding about crypto and the taxation regime. So thank you so much, sir. We have understood the budget, I think, in and out, and we've covered most of the highlights of the budget and understood your perspectives on different questions that came up in our mind. Thank you so much for answering all our questions, and I would now request Nilesh to give the vote of thanks.
Okay. So this brings to the end of the session. On behalf of Sydenham Alumni Cell and all the viewers, we would like to extend a sincere gratitude to CA Snehal Muzoomdar, CA Ashok Pradhan, CA Atul Joshi. We are grateful for your time and effort, sir. I would like to also thank our principal, ma'am, Dr. Madhurika Kagalkar, ma'am, for permitting us for the event, and principal in charge, Dr. Nanda Pandharikar, ma'am, for showing interest in the event. And I would also like to thank our professor in charge, Dr. Ritesh Shingal, sir, for constantly supporting us and motivating us. Not last but not the least, all the alumni cell members for making this event a successful one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Shadul,
Shadul.
is the live over? Just a second, Sakshi. Hello? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello,
It
sir.
was a wonderful session. We really
We are
learned
just
so
waiting. Sakshi, let's wait for the Q&A. If the live is over or not.
Sure.
Sakshi, one more thing. There is a request received by me from one of the viewers. If you have a recording, please send it.
So the video will be on YouTube, and this is for all the viewers.
Okay.
They can anytime watch the video on Sydenham Alumni Cell's YouTube.
We are still live.
We are still live.